I believe in you. I believe in your ability to make up your own mind and to listen to my words with an open mind and open heart. I believe that in spite of a lifetime of media propaganda, that you can still think for yourself, and I trust you to do that. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't take the time and effort to make this documentary. I'm confident that you will discover that I discuss the volatile subject of immigration with reason and with love. And I trust you to have an open mind and open heart about this subject. And just about everybody knows by now, the demographics of Europe and America are changing dramatically and quickly. Today, I will focus on Europe. Since the dawn of European history, the indigenous people of Europe have dwelled in this continent that stretches from the geysers and glaciers of Iceland and home of the oldest standing parliament in the world, to the Emerald Isles of what is now Ireland and Britain, to the northern lands of Scandinavia. It extends down into Denmark and Holland and Belgium, France, Switzerland, Spain and Italy, Germany and Austria, Poland, Czech and Slovak states, Hungary, the Baltic states, and on to the old Russian Empire, and what is now Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Romania, down into Croatia, the Balkans, and into the land of Greece, the ancient birthplace of the essence of our Western values and our aesthetic and artistic sense. Over thousands of years, individual European peoples developed unique expressions of European culture in languages, art forms, music, expressions of literary spirit and societal structure. There are even some slight physical and even innate behavioral nuances that have evolved among the European peoples, such as the emotionally emotive Latins and the quietly stoic Scandinavians, the robust Russians, and those French who savor the styles and the art and music and fashion and cuisine, and oh, what delicious food they do create. They're works of art in themselves. The Britons developed government and business to a fine art, and whose organization and industriousness and science, along with their cousins, the Germans, have created the most productive economies the world's ever known, and which continue on with their descendants in America. And of course, the European people as a whole have produced incredible contributions in science, medicine, the arts, music, architecture, and in the heart of Europe, they've created some of the world's most pristine and uncorrupt societies, societies of cleanliness and order. Sometimes you can find a pub's bathroom in Germany that's cleaner than a hospital operating room in some other parts of the world. In spite of the differences among the people of Europe, Europe is in whole part of the same civilization, the same values. A Russian is moved by the European spirit evoked by Shakespeare, as much as a Briton is moved by the humanity of Dostoevsky. All Europeans have listened to Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, and Bach, and Mozart. And in the museums, from London to Prague to Moscow to Rome, expressions of European art hang in rooms without European borders. Rembrandt adorns walls next to Dürer. Keats' poetry is on shelves next to Pushkin's. Plato's works can be found near Cervantes. The book covers of Chaucer and Goethe rub shoulders on the shelves of the libraries of the Western world. And it's not just the achievements of European people that have so enriched Europe and indeed the world. There is immense human worth and value in the simplest expressions of European culture, in its home life, in its mores and values, just as there are in any unique cultural expression anywhere on earth. The loving and peaceful nature of Christmas, for instance, and the scent of evergreen trees adorn homes wherever there are Europeans in the world. And perhaps the one thing we're not allowed to mention frankly is that we Europeans have unique expressions of beauty as well, from some tall, striking, blue-eyed blonde Scandinavians to some Latins of olive hue and exquisite, delicate features that are framed by luxurious, dark hair, smooth as silk. But now massive immigration is a threat to ending these unique expressions of humanity, for a non-European wave is sweeping into Europe with the force of a tsunami. Unless the tide is stemmed, it could forever wipe away the expressions of life here. Unless stopped, it will surely make our descendants a minority that will not be free to live as our fathers and mothers lived. Freedom in the true sense would be lost, and your descendants would chafe under an alien cultural and social tyranny under which they might well walk as strangers in their own land, only eventually to disappear entirely from the earth. Notice I use the words could or might, for the battle for the existence and heritage of the European people is not over, not by the slightest bit. There are hundreds of millions of us in Europe, and every day more of us begin to recognize the existential threat of massive immigration. We still have the power to preserve ourselves and renew ourselves, and I believe deep down in my heart that we will do so. As sure as the earth turns to the sun after the darkness of night, our people will rise again. To resist this massive immigration that will destroy our culture, our heritage, and even the unique and beautiful physical expression of our people, is the core of human liberty and justice. To demand the survival of your own people is a right we accord to every other people. Asking for the life and liberty and freedom of our own people affirms, in its own way, the same rights for all people. It is the most basic of all human rights. We live in a strange world, a hypocritical world, where it's deemed noble to, quote, save Tibet and save the heritage, traditions, and culture and the unique expression of humanity of the Tibetan people. But media hypocrites call it evil and racist to desire to preserve the people and the beauty of Europe. Should you and your family have human rights any less sacred than Tibetans? In Europe, most of the immigration has been from Muslim nations. There has probably been no stronger advocate of respect, love, and peace between Muslims and Christians than I. My voice has condemned forcefully the crimes of international Zionism, which has committed unspeakable evils against the Palestinian people, the Lebanese people, Syrians, Egyptians, and other Mideast people.
Your fight for freedom is the same as our fight for freedom. I bring you a message from many Americans, many people in Britain and around the Western world. We say in unison, no war for Israel.
I've spoken against the efforts of America and other nations to police the world and bend it to the tyranny and crushing, soulless values of globalism. I became a political enemy of the Zionist forces in the American government when I traveled the world exposing the lies leading to the Iraq War and the continued Afghanistan war. The truth is that the Zionists occupy the capitals of Europe and America as surely as they occupy Jerusalem, London, Berlin, Paris, and Washington suffer in a political and media occupation no less destructive than that in Palestine. The ruling axis of world media from Hollywood to New York is the ultimate source of the suffering of the Palestinian people, and in truth, every people on earth suffer from it. The sick wasteland of Hollywood and the mass media are the values of violence, sexual irresponsibility, and crudeness.
Them sitting around talking about sex, getting loopy, drinking champagne together.
How often do you guys have sex?
Sex.
Sex, sex, sex.
Moral relativism, alcohol and drug abuse, and even dietary habits that have destroyed or damaged the lives of hundreds of millions of people. I repeat, hundreds of millions of lives have been destroyed by the values of Hollywood and the media. The only way the Zionists could make us support Israel in the furtherance of the ongoing war against the Muslim people in other parts of the world was to take over our media and political structure so as to subordinate our true interest to that of Zionism. To the Muslim world, and specifically to the Palestinian people, I say this. the Zionists are able to commit crimes against you because the Zionists control us. And interestingly, it is the Zionists and Jewish extremists who have propelled massive immigration to both Europe and America in a divide and conquer strategy. Now, if that sounds strange and counterintuitive to you, it is simply a fact that's easily proven. The same media and government influence that have supported the supremacist, racist state of Israel is the same media and governments that have supported massive immigration into European and American lands. It is not debatable. It's fact. It's easily proven. In a recent lecture in a university in the Mideast, I posed a question to the academics and the students in my audience, and I share it with you now. I told them, suppose millions of European Christians were coming into your Islamic nation. So many were coming that Europeans threatened to become the majority and your own people to become a minority. The symbols of your faith, traditions, and values of your land were being removed and transformed. Eventually, European Christians and European non-believers would come to control the heartbeat and values of your country. Suppose your people had a low birth rate and didn't want overpopulation in your country because of the social and environmental destruction that overpopulation brings. But millions of Europeans were pouring in, and their birth rates were many times higher than yours. And your children would eventually become like strangers in their own cities and streets. I ask them, is there anyone here who would support this massive European invasion? Anyone who believes it would be good for your nation, for your faith, for your people? The room grew silent. If you do, please raise your hand, I said, and not a single hand went up. Please, I ask again, is there not even one of you who believes this would be a good thing for your people, for your country? And not a single hand rose from the 1,000 hands in the audience. You see, people have an innate ability to recognize truth when they hear it. I asked them if they now understood the European concern about immigration, and the audience rose from their seats and began to clap and cheer for my honesty. Now, does any thoughtful European, not completely brainwashed by MTV and Hollywood's propaganda about the blessings of multiculturalism, does anybody really believe that the invasion of millions of non-Europeans of a different heritage, faith, and tradition from that of Europe is a good thing? Do they really believe that it's a good thing for Europe when the non-Europeans of a passionate religious belief encompassing religious orthodoxy, get to become a majority and gain complete control over the structure of society and the values and norms of our own society? I understand that Muslims from poor nations and nations of less opportunity have come to Europe for the chance for a better life, and no individual can be faulted for that. But if great numbers of Muslims, including better educated ones, leave their lands, does this not decapitate the intellect and the needs of their own nations? The head of the leading academic university in one Muslim nation where I lectured told me just that he sees a benefit in Muslim students educated in the West, but when they taste the living standards of Europe and don't come back home, he said, quote, "Our nation suffers greatly from their loss." A number of Muslim nations in Africa, such as Libya and Egypt, have themselves experienced immigration problems of incredible magnitude, such as from Sudan. And with the immigration, they have encountered waves of crime, drugs, threats to unity and cohesion and brotherhood in their own nations. And they themselves have acted to secure their borders, and they've even repatriated the invaders. Europe already suffers an incredible human cost from the non-European immigration, in some cases, a horrific cost. On a peaceful Christmas thoroughfare in Stockholm, a suicide bomber blew himself up attempting to take the lives of innocent men, women, and children who were enjoying preparation for one of the most sacred traditions of Europe, Christmas.
But a Swedish news agency has said that it received an email before the explosions.
The email was talking in general about there was time for the Swedish people, Swedish children, daughters and sisters to die.
Similar events have happened in Britain, France, America. Social services in Europe and America are overwhelmed, and economic costs to the European and American people are devastating. Riots of murder, rape, blood, and mayhem have affected whole suburbs of Paris and London. Whole parts of European and American cities have become a no man's land for Europeans, where even walking on the street can endanger your life. Now, before the onset of massive immigration, European children could walk those same streets unmolested and perfectly safe. And now, no sane adult would even enter some of those areas, much less allow their children to go there. Nations such as Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands, England, France, Germany, where gang rape was once unknown and unthinkable, now have 13 or 14-year-old girls experiencing this horrific blessing of multiculturalism. Little European villages that have been practically free from violent crime for hundreds of years are now places where crime is commonplace, and the crime increases overwhelmingly from immigrants. Is there any healthy people on earth who would want this for themselves or for their children? Is it racist for you as a parent to want your child to be safe and sound, or is it simply the God-given or nature-given impulse that it's the most natural and healthy thing on earth, and something that your children rely on? Parents that love them enough to give them an environment where they don't have to live in fear or oppression. All human beings on earth have a right to protect their children, to preserve their culture, to preserve their unique character and expression of life, to preserve what they are, the vision that they have for society, the vision that's their own, the image of what they find beautiful. Now that's the foundation of human rights, and Europeans are entitled to that right as much as any other people on earth. To not accord the European people the right to live is true racism. In fact, not only is it racism, it is genocide in the true sense, an eradication of a particular people from the earth. Now that's the ultimate racism. The most populous nation on earth is China. There are 1.3 billion people, are almost all Chinese. Japan is essentially all Japanese. Uganda is all black. And for all practical purposes, so is the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. Every European people all over the globe, from Russia to Iceland to America to New Zealand and Australia, have birth rates that cause their population to shrink. If you combine massive non-European immigration and high birth rate immigrant populations, the people of Europe are facing a genocide that will wipe them off the face of the earth. So as Europeans, what should our response to mass immigration be? Obviously, we must stop it now. There is no issue more vital to you and your children. You stand to lose the most important thing to you in the world. What you do right now will decide if you live in a society of civility or one of conflict and hatred. What you do now will determine if you and your children are safe and sound on the streets, or even if you and they can sleep safely in your own beds at night. It will determine whether your economy is strong and healthy or weak, whether you live in an organic and healthy society of harmony and brotherhood and love, or one racked by strife, discord, and division. You see, mass immigration eventually produces not love and brotherhood, but division, hate, and discord in most societies. The UN shows that about 80% of all bloody conflicts and civil wars are ethnically born, and one can pretend otherwise, but truth is truth. Why not recognize human realities and differences and deal honestly with them rather than ignoring reality? What's the answer to all this? First off, the answer is not hatred or violence toward individual Muslims in Europe or anywhere else. Harming the innocent is wrong by any moral standard, and considering that the enemies of Europe sit in command of the global media, they will only use such violence as proof that we, who simply love our European heritage, are morally bankrupt and evil. It does not matter to the media that there are 1,000 innocent native Europeans harmed by acts of criminality and violence from immigrants for every one immigrant harmed by nationalists. Acts of hooliganism against immigrants is not only terribly wrong, but it's stupid and plays right into the hands of our eternal enemies. Europeans have a long history of even being willing to sacrifice their own lives for what they see as a moral cause. Many Europeans historically have even been willing to be burned at the stake for the sake of their principles, for doing what's right. Too many of our people are allowing themselves, their own families, their own people, to be sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism. Our task is to change minds, to make those who would sacrifice themselves and their families in the service of multiculturalism see that they're not acting in the service of good, but of evil. You do not sacrifice for love when you produce a society of hate and civil war and division, when you destroy a great people. Furthermore, you must understand that the immigrants are not the ones who change the laws or who have made too many duped Europeans believe they should welcome their own destruction. Now, those actors have been among us for a long time. They've been poisoning the minds of our young and old and opening the gates to the invader. We must sweep them from power in media and government. We must stop those who teach us to hate ourselves, to hate our own heritage. So ultimately, it is our responsibility to save Europe and save America. Even though there are millions of immigrants flooding in, and even though the Zionist hypocrites control the media that brainwashes our people, we are ultimately the ones who will determine our own destiny. We must take responsibility, and here's exactly what we must do. Number one, we must awaken our brethren to the moral nature of our cause. Our cause is rooted not in racism or oppression, but in human rights. The truth is all around us. We must educate our people to this truth, and with the power of the truth, combined with our love and passion and our dedication, we will awaken our people. We have the power to do it with videos just like this one. And increasing numbers of brave people are learning the truth, and they're learning the arguments for that truth. You must learn how to defend our people and debate these issues. You must never let one verbal attack against our people in school or university, in work or business, go unanswered. It will be hard at first for many, but with time, the tide will turn. I see the change coming. You can convert the whole world one person at a time. Number two, we must stop immigration cold. We must only vote for political people who vote right on legislation, but who also campaign and speak out against immigration. And we must get the message to our people that any elected official or government employee who facilitates or supports continued immigration is a criminal, a traitor. There is none more despicable than those who betray their own country, their own family, their own people. This is a universal value, true for every people on earth. They are the worst of criminals. Number three, we must create a new view of life, completely different than that promoted by the Zionist globalist media. A new faith based on the highest ideals of Europe, not the degeneracy and moral destructiveness, the moral wasteland of Hollywood. We must have our own media in our own countries. We must develop our own media, our own music, our own literature, our own movies and plays and dramas, our own news broadcasting outlets. We must boycott the media conglomerates that instill the values of death, ill health, self-hate, degeneracy, weakness, ugliness, drunkenness, and drug abuse, sexual irresponsibility and crudeness, and even the unhealthy foods and drinks that destroy and damage the lives of hundreds of millions of people. We will create a media that celebrates life and beauty, the love of family, and the magnificent gift of children. the promotion of physical health and fitness, and the promotion of real arts and music that ennoble mankind rather than defile mankind. We will have governments that reflect that mission. We will do whatever we must to defend and preserve our European peoples and our European values and freedoms. We are willing to fight to the death if necessary in defense of the life and freedom of our people, just as our forefathers were. But we don't want war. And we know that such is not necessary if we just win the battle for the minds and hearts of our people, for we are the vast majority. When we have the power, we will preserve our European heritage, we will restore our lands, not by cruelty or hatred toward individual immigrants, but with the idea that we will help preserve them as well as us. Ultimately, we will help them too in their quest for a better life by making possible their living in their own lands, which are as dedicated to their hopes and dreams and values and desires as our lands are dedicated to our own vision. Every nation, every people has the right to be free, to preserve their culture, their values, their heritage. And so do we. The people of European descent, both in Europe and America and elsewhere, have the same right. This is a basic, eternal human right. We shall defend ourselves with every breath of our body. The first thing you can do is download this video in only highest quality and post it all over the internet and tell your friends and family, even strangers, about this video. If it's censored by the enemies of freedom, tell people to search for the title and find it there on the internet. This video represents true human rights and freedom, and this message must go out to the world. Make sure that you go to davidduke.com and subscribe to news and updates so I can communicate to you about new videos and the tools we need to win the freedom and preserve the heritage of our people. I call on you to devote yourself to your people, to the great heritage that came before you, and the beautiful heritage that can be realized in your children. The time is now. Seize the moment.